it is a very difficult thing to do what they're trying to do there, and so they've had various difficulties every time they turn it on. There's various things that happen that makes it impossible for them to finish the tests. So, the energy levels, I think, are higher than what was anticipated. So, for instance, in the first instance, some of the anchors that held some of the magnetic coils ripped out, and some of the parts went flying through the accelerator and damaged the detectors and so on. And so there's been problems all over this experiment.
Bird drop bread in there and everything else.
Yes, that's right. So there's been difficulties, but I think we're getting there slowly but surely. I believe that what they're going to find is going to be quite unusual, that they're going to be quite surprised at what they find there. And that we're going to learn a whole lot about a whole new level of physics from these experiments.
As long as they don't create a black hole on us, Nassim.
Well, you see, my theory, George, says that every atom is already a mini black hole.
Yeah.
So, I'm not too worried about it. The geometry of the experiment, the dynamics they're using, if they create anything close to what I believe is a singularity, which is basically an atom, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be short-lived and dissipate quite fast because the geometry is not quite right.
Well, Nassim, what do you think is really happening with HAARP? I mean, what are they doing over there with these things?
Well, it's hard to say. HAARP has been a project that has been ongoing for a fairly long time now. There's obviously facilities in many different countries around the world, and there is, what are they using HAARP to do is difficult to answer. Most people are not privy to this level of information, and but people ask me, well, if you believe they're poking holes in the ionosphere, why would they be doing that? Is it just because they want to demonstrate their power or so on? And I believe, and at the end of the day, and this is really, again, an opinion and a conclusion I've come to just because, from the studies I've made, maybe our governments are trying to reduce global heating by, removing some of the blanketing that our ionosphere produces.
Because this thing must be on 24/7. They must have the switch on all the time.
Well, it's hard to say, but certainly, that could be a reason why they're poking holes and trying to allow some of the heat to escape. So there might be humanitarian reasons.
Absolutely. We've had Nick Begich on the program, who was one of the first to publicize HAARP, which stands for the High Frequency Active Oral Research Program. And what they say on their own website is that it's a scientific endeavor aimed at studying the properties and behavior of the ionosphere with an emphasis on understanding and enhancing communications and surveillance systems for civilian and defense purposes. Now, what the heck does that mean?
Well, there's many reasons why you would want to bulge the ionosphere and be able to control one of those bulges. For instance, it would provide you a means to communicate across the horizon, meaning that instead of bouncing a signal across to a satellite, which is a weak link in the defense system, and then bouncing it back further across the horizon on the Earth, if you could bulge the ionosphere in such a way that you can use it as a reflective lens to send a signal across the ionosphere, across the atmosphere, and across the horizon, then, it would be an advantageous device for communication in military industrial complex. So, that is probably what they're thinking of when they're describing this on their website, communication and surveillance done without the satellite structure, but actually directly from the ionospheric bulge. Then there's many other things you might be able to do. Like I said, you might be able to create anomalies in which you're able to release some of the greenhouse effects that are occurring on our planet, or you may be able to modify weather or do things that, military complex industry, look for in their development.
Absolutely. There's no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it is, I just have a feeling that it's a little more sinister than they present it to be.
Yes. In general, the whole concept of defense, which in general should be called offense in our planet, is sinister in general. I wish humans would get along a little better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've got to get up to the enterprisemission.com website. I'm curious when you have some time, Nassim, to read Richard Hoagland's analysis of the Norway spiral. He talks a little bit about HARP in that, too.
Yes, it's very interesting. I'd love to study it more and see what he concluded to.
Tell me a little bit more about your theories of fractals in geometry and what that means to all of us.
Well, I early on in my evolution, I started to realize that maybe we couldn't just account for our reality, like all the atoms that makes up our body and everything else around us, just with the concept of little billiard balls we call atoms that are flying around, that there may be a deeper fractal reality that's occurring. And what I mean by that there's not really a God particle. There's not really a smallest particle that makes up all our reality, that the smaller particle could be divided again and divided again and divided again, and that if we kept on building larger and larger accelerators, we'd get smaller and smaller and smaller particles, and that there was no end to it. And when I started to think that way, I realized, well, maybe our reality is made of little singularity, little black holes, because black holes have this infinite nature, this infinite mass, this infinite density at its center. And when I start to explore that and look at the atom with that lens, it started to become evident that this must be the case. I started writing scaling laws showing that from universal size. I mean, most people don't know, but our universe obeys the condition of a black hole. If you take the mass of the universe and you put it in the radius that we believe our universe is, and you calculate if that mass-radius relationship obeys the condition of a black hole, it does, meaning light should not be able to escape. So the idea that we live inside a black hole and that everything inside it are smaller black holes in different scales that we're on the outside of. So we're seeing the radiative dynamic of the outside event horizon of a black hole start to come into my field, and I start to think that way, and I start to write physics that way and mathematics that way. And it all added up to correct predictions in many different ways, eventually bringing me to write this paper, the Schwarzschild proton, which just won an award in Europe, and that described the atom as this mini black hole with infinite density, the nuclei of an atom as a mini black hole. And that really has many implications in physics, but as well in philosophy.
I would love to get your take on why you think we're here and what we are.
Well, that's a large question, but if I would to attempt to answer that, I would say that, I think that, part of the Schwarzschild proton paper is I show that actually the space between things, the vacuum, is not empty, and that inside the proton, there's all the energy available for all protons in the universe. And so that everything is entangled through this web of information across space. The vacuum is actually what connects all things.
It's wireless. You just don't really see it, do you?
That's right. and you don't experience it because